Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Police have identified multiple locations in which we have several confirmed deceased victims.
4 dead in targeted shootings in Penticton. Also,
a raging fire engulfs the iconic Notre-Dame Cathedral in Paris. And
it's really emotionally draining. I get pretty upset afterwards.
BC's opioid crisis, how one man helped prevent almost 200 overdose deaths.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
good evening. In Paris, there is sadness and disbelief tonight after one of the most iconic buildings in the world went up in flames.
People could only watch as more than 400 firefighters battled the blaze at Notre-Dame Cathedral.
As the CBC's Thomas Degler reports, damage to the 13th century structure is extensive.
Hellish. A cathedral that stood for 800 years brought to its knees in just over an hour. Notre-Dame, the symbol of medieval Paris, known to draw huge crowds year-round, but not like this.
Everyone here is stunned, and just, as you can see around me, people are just watching. Even the cruise ships are just waiting and watching in shock.
Hundreds of firefighters battled in precarious conditions, facing relentless flames, and the sight of history going up in smoke. This is a catastrophe, said Notre-Dame's rector, Patrick Chauvet. I'm very upset. All I can do is pray. The cathedral's towering spire, famous in its own right, went down to the sound of disbelief. It's unbearably sad, he says. This is France that's being lost.
Paris is crying now, not just me.
Investigators suspect it was all an accident as Notre-Dame undergoes multi-million-dollar restoration work. Just days ago, crews removed priceless statues from above, unknowingly saving them before the roof was destroyed. The French president met with first responders and emerged tonight with a promise. We will rebuild this cathedral all together, said Emmanuel Macron. It's part of France's destiny. Crowds cheered on firefighters for having saved what they could. Those two famous towers are still standing. Crews used flashlights to search for damage well into the night. But how much has been lost? The answer might be just as jarring as the sight of this giant gutted. Thomas Degler, CBC News, London.
Now, this may all have been very far away from Vancouver, but residents here reacting with horror at the pictures and videos from the French capital.
It's terrible. It's even though it's in Paris, I think it's a cultural heritage, belongs to human beings.
I mean, it's symbolic of all these awful things that are going on around the world right now.
Me, the photos I saw, it was the roof part, but I just hope it won't damage the whole cathedral, because again, there's no way they can make the cathedral the way it was before. So hopefully it doesn't go, but I know Parisians must be devastated right now.
A 25-year-old man has been charged with first-degree murder after a shooting at a Salmon church that left one man dead and another in hospital. Matrix Savage Gathergood allegedly accused of shooting 78-year-old Gordon Parmenter inside the Church of Christ yesterday morning. A second man shot in the leg. He is in stable condition in hospital tonight. Gathergood is in police custody. Parmenter's son told the CBC his father knew his alleged killer. He describes his father as a pillar in the community who is known for helping high-risk young people in need.
Gordon, outstanding community person, strong in his church, strong in the community. Many people knew the Parmenter family.
Thank you.
And so there's lots of anguish and sadness. I know my community, and I know that they'll support the church parish and the immediate community around and the family. And so we have our flags at half-mast today at City Hall. In respect of what happened, I think it'll take time to kind of understand, but eventually we will move forward.
Gathergood is also facing charges of aggravated assault and disguise with intent to commit an indictable offense. He is expected to appear in court on Tuesday.
A Coquitlam piano teacher charged with sexually assaulting former students has died suddenly just 3 months before he was set to stand trial. Dmitry Kubishkin taught lessons at homes in Coquitlam, Surrey, Delta, and Richmond for more than 2 decades. Last year, he was charged with 15 counts involving 11 alleged victims, all former students. Coquitlam RCMP confirmed Kubishkin died Thursday in the Tri-Cities area and that his death is not considered suspicious. The BC Prosecution Service has now dropped the case.
All 14 contempt charges against 14 protesters who blocked pipeline construction in the north have been dropped. At a Prince George courthouse today, both the Crown and Coastal GasLink agreeing not to pursue charges. The 14 people accused were part of a remote protest against gas pipeline construction. Their actions sparked supportive protests across Canada, making international headlines. RCMP moved in to enforce a court injunction against them. A proposed Coastal GasLink pipeline is opposed by the hereditary chiefs of the Wet'suwet'en Nation.
Well, if you're a driver, you might have spent the weekend in a bit of shock over just how high gas prices have gone in Metro Vancouver.
But as the CBC's Leanne Young tells us, there are ways that you can save a couple of bucks.
It's the third time in a week Metro Vancouver gas prices have jumped again.
Ridiculous. It's, first of all, it's way too high, and the cost of it, we have to limit ourselves as to where we can go.
Gas prices are going pretty crazy out here.
Yeah, hard to afford,
I can't afford to drive. And I have a car that's really, really good on gas.
But not all prices were equal. In Surrey, drive 2 minutes away and save yourself 6 cents a litre. And that was the case in Vancouver, where it was $1.65.9 at this station. Drive a couple blocks down and prices were $1.59.9.
Some of those gas stations and their suppliers are flat out of gas and they're buying gas at the new higher price. The other guys have got a backlog storage.
This latest round of increase is due to a couple reasons. BC relies on American refineries, which limits supply. The Canadian dollar is low, and there's the switch to summer gas, which has different requirements and is federally regulated.
And the difference really is this. In the summer, you want to make sure your gasoline doesn't expand or evaporate into the environment or into your emission system.
The latest hike in prices have forced some drivers to change their behavior.
We're thinking about actually getting maybe a hybrid next year. Got to change. Wanted to get a pickup truck, but so expensive. So
I'm buying an electric bicycle.
Walking's going to be the thing then, right? What else can we do?
So if public transportation, biking, or walking just isn't an option for you and you've still got to drive, there are some ways you can save on gas.
The air conditioning, when being operated, steals some energy from the engine. So if we shut the air conditioning off, roll the windows down a little bit, we can find we'll save a little bit more fuel.
Be sure to check your tire pressure. If they're low, it adds resistance and makes your engine push harder. Plus, watch your driving habits.
Driving on the highway, for example, 80 to 85 kilometers is the most fuel efficient for the average vehicle.
Take advantage of those tips this summer because analysts say prices won't be coming down much further than this. Leanne Young, CBC News, Vancouver.
When gunshots rang out in Penticton this morning, people were told to stay inside. They later learned 4 people had been shot and killed.
The CBC's Brady Strachan is in Penticton tonight for us. And Brady, the violence happened in several locations. Take us through how it all went down.
Well, police have been here all day. One of 3 scenes of shooting here in Penticton. Residents in this neighborhood tell me that at around 10:30 this morning, some of them were out in their yards enjoying the day when they heard a series of loud pops, 3 or 4, what turned out to be gunshots. One woman says she looked to see a man with a rifle who then fled down this side street here. There was other reports of gunshots at 2 other locations in Penticton, and we've later learned that 4 people have been victim of this violence, 2 men and 2 women. The RCMP said a man in his 60s later turned himself into the Penticton RCMP detachment. Now, they haven't released his name or the names of the victims here, and they don't know the relationship between the couples. They do say this is likely a targeted attack. People here in this normally quiet neighborhood say this is all very distressing.
Definitely an
an eye-opener for everybody. And then when it continued on, then I kind of thought, well, what's going on here? You know, like, is this guy on the loose, and is he just like shooting randomly? You don't know, right? So I made sure he was safe at daycare. They were in lockdown, and he was at part of town that nothing was going on, and I thought that was the best to keep Hayden there, and then till I found out more of what was going on, and then I could also hang with my neighbor a bit to make sure she was okay.
So people obviously reacting with shock and horror as to what's happened in their neighborhoods here. And there's many investigators on the scene looking into these alleged attacks and also the relationship between the victims and the shooter. They say right now they don't have that information. They're still notifying next of kin of the victims.
Brady Strachan live in Penticton for us tonight. Thanks, Brady.
Island Health is warning families with children attending a private school in Victoria that they may have been exposed to measles. The possible exposure happened last week. The health authority now in the process of contacting parents of about 300 students at the Selkirk Montessori School. The school teaches students from 3 to 14 years of age. An official at the school confirmed the possible exposure. They say the younger sibling of a student who attends the school may have been exposed to the virus. Students who are not vaccinated will not be allowed to attend for 3 weeks to prevent transmission of the disease. And Island Health is also warning about 2 other locations where people may have been exposed to the measles. The first is at Victoria Butterfly Gardens on April 10th between 3 and 5 in the afternoon. The second at the Walmart at Uptown Shopping Center in Saanich on April 11th and 12th between 2 and 5:30 p.m.
The Conservative MP for Langley-Aldergrove is in hospital, and doctors are testing to confirm whether he has pancreatic cancer. Mark Warawa says doctors are also looking to see if the cancer has spread to other organs. He says surgery and chemotherapy are an option, but only if the cancer hasn't spread. Warawa is finishing his 5th term in the House of Commons. In January, he announced he will not be seeking re-election in the fall. 3 years after declaring a public health emergency, BC remains in the grips of an overdose crisis.
All this week, we're looking at what's changed and what needs to come next as part of our series, Extended Emergency. While officials say the numbers are starting to level out, illicit overdose deaths continue to kill British Columbians at an alarming rate. Last year alone, more than 1,500 people died. That's about 4 a day, the majority of deaths involving fentanyl.
While the number killed has increased year over year, so too has access to life-saving services.
The CBC's Jesse Johnston brings us the story of one man who's revived nearly 200 overdose victims using naloxone.
Whenever there's a story about overdoses in the news, you probably hear naloxone get mentioned. Naloxone can reverse the effects of an overdose. And few people know more about that process than Dwayne Martin. He's revived more than 190 OD victims.
It's really emotionally draining. I get pretty upset afterwards. Sometimes they sit right up and they'll have no idea that all happened.
To understand how naloxone works, you first have to understand how opioids work. Your brain has receptors, and your body produces chemicals naturally that grab onto those receptors. And those chemicals tell your brain how you should feel: happy, sleepy, or hungry. When you take an opioid, it grabs onto those receptors too. So say you're using a drug like heroin, for example. It sends a stronger signal than your brain is used to, so you feel euphoric and sleepy. The more brain receptors the drug grabs onto, the more your body slows down. And if your body slows down too much, you stop breathing. That's an overdose. Naloxone can either be injected or taken as a nasal spray, and it works the same way an opioid does. It grabs onto those brain receptors too, and when it does, it knocks the drug off the receptor.
You have to give it every 5 minutes, breath every 7 seconds, and make them uncomfortable. Talk to them a lot because they can hear you.
If the OD victim doesn't wake up within 5 minutes of giving them that first dose of naloxone, it's time to give them another dose. Naloxone is effective, but it only works on opioids. So if you're using a stimulant like cocaine or another drug like an antihistamine or even alcohol, naloxone is not going to work. Your naloxone kit won't last forever. It usually has a shelf life of 18 to 24 months. It won't hurt anyone if you administer it after its expiry date, but it also won't be as effective. If you're an opioid user or you're likely to come across an overdose victim, you probably qualify for a free kit and free training that's offered by the province. For more information, you can call 811. Jesse Johnston, CBC News.
I hope you didn't get used to the sunshine today, because I don't think it's sticking around.
I don't think so.
No, not very exciting. But let's find out more about that from Christy.
Thanks, Anita. Well, it hasn't been too bad of a day out there across much of the region. Temperatures seasonably cool, a couple of degrees below what's normal, which is about a 13 or 14 degree high in the area. 10 degrees in Vancouver this afternoon. This is about 4 o'clock. You can see temperatures a little milder towards Nanaimo, but a pretty quiet day weather-wise. Seeing some breaks in that cloud cover through the overnight period. Here's a look at our satellite and radar this afternoon. You did see even some pokes of sunshine out there. Not too bad of a day, but we are watching another impulse looking to make its way into the region as you move into late day tomorrow and into your Wednesday as well, bringing another round of steady precipitation. You can see that reflected in our satellite imagery just into the Pacific. That rolling in and starting to make its way through the region later tomorrow into the afternoon. So the morning, still seeing some breaks and maybe even some sunshine out there before we see that cloud cover really start to roll in earnest. Here's a look at our outlook. This is as you move through tonight. You can see a little bit of cloud cover here or there, maybe a pop-up shower, still very clear as you head up island. But this is tomorrow morning. You can see cloud cover, maybe some pop-up showers or flurries at higher elevation. Then through the afternoon, a little bit more in that showery weather. Not a lot of precipitation with this one, maybe a few millimeters through the day tomorrow before we get into some of the heavier precipitation through your day on Wednesday. Now, as you move towards the latter part of the week, it looks like we're in store for another heavy round of precipitation. You could see anywhere up to about 25 or 30 millimeters for Thursday. But until we get there, here's a look at what you can see. Again, not a lot of that accumulation until you get to your late day Wednesday into Thursday afternoon. This is about 3 o'clock Thursday. You can see extremely heavy precipitation in parts of the coastline towards Vancouver, maybe even up to 30 millimeters. So it is something to keep in mind as you head towards the end of the week, and we're heading into a long weekend, so important there too. Winds a little bit breezy, especially towards the Victoria area around Abbotsford as well. You could see some gusts up to about 45 or 50 kilometers per hour, but otherwise it will be the rain that's the weather story of this week. Here's a look at tomorrow's forecast across the region. You can see breaks of sunshine into Cranbrook, 11 degrees through the day tomorrow. Again, showers on the coast, but that will come especially later in the day. Taking a closer look at Victoria, 12 degrees and showers. Again, showers as you head up island as well towards Abbotsford, 13 and showers. If you're joining us from Vancouver, 11 degrees tomorrow, about 2 to 4 millimeters of precipitation. Again, steadier rain through the end of the week, especially to your Thursday, 25 to 30 millimeters expected. Then through the weekend, some sunshine. Actually not too bad to get outside for Saturday and your Sunday. Temperatures at 12 degrees by Sunday.
Well, we'll look forward to next weekend. Thanks, Christy.
A children's choir from Uganda is at a loss after being robbed while on tour here in Vancouver. The Sawuti African Children's Choir had thousands of dollars in donations and electronics stolen on Saturday,
including some of the children's music that they, of course, need to perform. Our Gianpaolo Mendoza caught up with their choir before the show in Abbotsford.
It's just under an hour to the show, and the singers are starting their vocal warm-up. It follows an afternoon of scrambling to adjust their set after some of their equipment was stolen Saturday.
I think the things that they stole are the things that we use in the ministry. They stole the money, the laptops, papers. We are so disappointed to the end.
They had just finished performing in Vancouver when they discovered thieves had stolen thousands of dollars of donations and equipment from their truck, which was parked at Pender and Abbott Street. The suspects made off with the money, an iPad, and 2 computers, one of which contained the choir's music.
We want them to bring them back because it's hard for us to get music because we lost our 2 laptop where we had our music, so it's hard for us to connect and sing.
The singers say they wanted to do this tour to raise money for their friends at home.
We are also reaching out to finding sponsorships for the kids back home. It is absurd, but we believe God for better things. We believe God for provision.
The choir has started a fundraiser to try and recover some of the money that was taken from them, but there are other items that are irreplaceable.
With loads of personal belongings in there, such as our birth certificates, marriage certificate, copy of our will, because we're here for 6 months. We needed those documents with us, my passport.
The group has 2 more shows in BC, and they're grateful for how the community has responded. They're still excited to finish the tour.
We've been really doing everything well. We have been progressing day in, day out, and they are really happy, and they are looking forward to enjoying more of Canada and doing more concerts and blessing people as we have been blessed too.
Vancouver police say no arrests have been made. The choir is hoping they can recover as many of the stolen goods as possible. John Paulo Mendoza, CBC News, Abbotsford.
Now, this was the final day of campaigning in Alberta before tomorrow's provincial election. No matter what happens, the province will make history. Either the United Conservative Party will secure its first victory, or Alberta's first ever NDP government will be re-elected. Advanced polling saw a record 700,000 ballots cast.
We think the high advanced ballot turnout says Albertans want change that will get our economy back to work. But there's still a lot of people who have not yet voted. We'll be doing everything we can to encourage them to get out to the polls.
Our plan on the jobs and the economy is actually the better plan, and we are also committed to protecting your kids in your schools, protecting health care, and standing up for all Albertans and ensuring that all Albertans are welcome here.
Throughout the campaign, Jason Kenney tried to paint the NDP as being anti-oil pipeline and in league with the federal Liberals. But Kenney and the UCP faced allegations of voter fraud in the party leadership race. And they had to fend off a string of controversies over candidates' remarks that many people found offensive.
For more on what's at stake, here is Vasi Capellos, host of the CBC program Power in Politics, with a bit of a primer on why the Alberta election matters for all Canadians.
Who is fit to be the Premier of Alberta?
Jobs, the economy, and pipelines.
I know Albertans are angry. I'm angry too. I'm frustrated.
Premier Notley has made a disastrous deal, an alliance with Justin Trudeau, and all we have to show for it is a jobs crisis, no pipelines, and a carbon tax.
Alberta is Canada's 4th most populous province, but it has often in the past been described as the country's economic engine. It's also the province with the highest greenhouse gas emissions because it's ground zero for Canada's oil industry, which these days is struggling. Shortly before the last Alberta election, oil prices collapsed and they've barely recovered. The oil and gas industry makes up a quarter of Alberta's GDP, so when oil is selling at a discount, the economy suffers. According to one estimate, Alberta's GDP is expected to inch up by 1.3% this year, trailing every other province in growth. Since 2015, 130,000 people have lost their jobs. Most of them worked in the oil patch.
Build that fight! Build that fight!
Critics in the province pin the blame on the federal government and its inability to get new pipelines approved and built. Frustration has boiled over into protests aimed directly at Justin Trudeau.
I know how difficult the situation is right now for Albertans, how worried people are.
Even a multi-billion-dollar rescue of the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion couldn't stifle the anger because the pipeline is still not under construction and 2 years behind schedule.
This government has left us with a faint hope of only one pipeline.
Mark my words. This pipeline will get built. It has been the fight of my life, and I will not stop until the job is done.
Both the NDP and United Conservative parties say they're pro-pipeline and pro-oil sands, but there's one big difference. Rachel Notley supports a carbon tax. Jason Kenney doesn't.
Our proposal gets us to 80%, 86% of the targeted reductions of the current NDP government's plan with a whole lot less economic pain and without a retail carbon tax that's driving up the cost of everything.
If Kenney wins, he's promising a court challenge of the federal carbon tax and a referendum on equalization payments.
I will stick up for Alberta workers and create jobs. We need to get fair value for our resources.
Notley says if she's re-elected, she'll try and diversify Alberta's economy, moving the province away from that boom and bust cycle it knows all too well. Vasi Capellos, host of CBC's Power in Politics.
Well, back to one of our top stories now, and the images that stunned the world today. One of the most famous buildings in the world, the Notre-Dame Cathedral, on fire.
Benoit Lebon hails from Dawson Creek, and like many tourists in Paris, he was taking in the city from the Seine on a boat, and that's when he and his mother spotted the fire.
Oh, Benoit! Oh my God!
C'est vraiment Notre-Dame qui brûle, hein?
C'est vraiment Notre-Dame qui est en train de brûler.
Fire broke out around 7 p.m. local time in the attic of the 12th century building, and it quickly spread. Notre-Dame's roof soon collapsing, and with shocked crowds watching, the cathedral's spire fell to the ground. The entire wooden interior is no more.
But as night fell in Paris, hundreds of firefighters struggled to get the situation under control, and they say they have managed to save the skeleton of the iconic building and much of what was inside. Piece of good news in what was a somber day in the French capital. Crowds there gathered to sing and mourn. The cathedral, of course, one of the greatest architectural treasures of the Western world. The CBC's Briar Stewart has more on the iconic building.
For centuries, Notre-Dame has towered over Paris, a medieval holy site. Its Gothic architecture, a backdrop to history. Napoleon was crowned emperor here. Its bells mark Paris's liberation during the Second World War, and crowds gathered in front to celebrate.
So in the history of architecture, it's hugely important, but it's also one of those buildings that's really embedded itself in our culture, in our Western imagination.
Notre-Dame holds an unmistakable allure. It's renowned for its flying buttresses and stained glass rose windows, and it inspired Victor Hugo's novel, The Hunchback of Notre-Dame. This art historian studies the cathedral and has even climbed it. She says much of the building's original contents were destroyed during the French Revolution, but it still housed several religious relics and pieces of art.
It's a huge loss. In terms of what we can learn about the past, it's a loss because every little thing that still remains today is really precious.
This is what the altar looks like now. Some good news: it appears the crown of thorns, said to have been worn by Jesus Christ while he was crucified, was saved from the fire. Crews also battled to try to save the iconic bell towers. The bells inside were replaced in 2013 to mark the 850th anniversary of the cathedral. But for Matthew Whitfield, it was Notre-Dame's two organs that left him awestruck. He visited the cathedral because he wanted to hear them for himself.
It's an entirely different experience being surrounded by that grandeur and the density of sound that these instruments produce. It was truly extraordinary.
Even though officials say the cathedral's structure has been saved, the sense of loss is still profound.
Higher and higher it goes, reaching up.
Because while it's withstood wars and revolutions and been repaired before, it's not yet clear just how devastating the spire has been. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Vancouver.
Devastating, absolutely.
Yeah, profoundly sad. But they will rebuild.
They will, yes.
Macron says they will rebuild.
And we are going to leave you tonight with the bells of Vancouver's Christchurch Cathedral ringing out in solidarity with the people of Paris.